At my baby's 3-month checkup, the doctor asked to speak with me privately. He lowered his voice, and the look on his face made my heart race. My daughter was terrified of her own father. Not fussy, not colicky, not the ordinary protests of a newborn adjusting to a world that is loud and bright and confusing. Terrified. The kind of terror that lives in the body before language exists. The ancient, cellular kind. The kind that doesn't require explanation because it precedes explanation. The kind of fear that a 3-month-old should not know how to perform because she should not yet have a reason to know it. Every morning, the moment Michael stepped into the nursery doorway, Olivia went rigid. That's the word that stayed with me through everything that came after. Not crying, not upset, rigid, the way a body goes when it braces for something. Her tiny arms would snap close to her sides. Her back would arch. Her face would go from the particular soft lankness of a sleeping infant to something that punched me directly in the chest every single time. A scream that didn't build but arrived fully formed, like a fire alarm, like a warning. Michael would stand in the doorway and say, "She's just fussy. All babies are fussy. You're projecting." By the 5th morning, I couldn't hear that sentence anymore. By the 5th morning, something had shifted in me that I couldn't locate precisely but could feel. A cold, quiet thing settling in my chest like a stone in water, sinking slowly, still, inevitable. I need to tell you who I was before I tell you what happened, because the two things are connected in a way I didn't understand until much later. My name is Emily Carver. I was 31 years old when Olivia was born. I had been married to Michael for 4 years. 4 years that I had characterized to myself and to everyone who asked as good, which I understood later was not the same as happy, but which I had not examined closely enough at the time to notice the difference. Michael Carver is charming in the specific way of people who have learned charm as a tool. He is handsome, professionally successful, regional VP for a logistics firm, good salary, good title, the kind of resume that makes parents relax when you bring someone home. He is funny in groups and attentive in the early stages of things, and very, very good at explaining why whatever just happened was your misunderstanding. I had spent 4 years being told I misunderstood things. I had started to believe it. The pregnancy was something we had both said we wanted, though I understood later that wanted meant different things to each of us. To me, it meant a child, a family, the continuation of something. To Michael, I think now, it meant an audience. A permanent, captive, entirely dependent audience. His mother, Margaret, came to stay when Olivia was 3 weeks old. Margaret is 64, a retired school librarian from Western Pennsylvania, with the particular quality of warmth that some people carry their entire lives without effort, the kind that makes children climb into her lap and dogs follow her down sidewalks. She had driven 8 hours the day after we came home from the hospital. She had stayed quietly and helpfully for 10 weeks. I should have noticed earlier that Margaret never left Olivia alone with Michael if she could help it. I should have noticed that Margaret was always just nearby when he was in the nursery, always finding a reason to come in, always volunteering to take the baby before he asked. I should have noticed that her spine went straight as a rod whenever she heard the front door. I didn't notice, or I noticed and didn't let myself understand what I was seeing, which is a different thing. The first morning I understood that something was wrong, Olivia was 7 weeks old. Michael came into the nursery at 6:15 a.m. while I was nursing, which he sometimes did, stood in the doorway in his work clothes and looked at us with an expression that I had always read as affection, and that I now understood, with the clarity of hindsight, was something else. Assessment, maybe. Ownership. The look of someone confirming that their property is where they left it. He reached for her when she finished nursing, which was normal. We had a morning handoff routine. He'd hold her while I showered. Standard new parent logistics. Olivia's face changed when he reached for her. It wasn't a cry yet. It was a pre-cry face, the kind that builds for a second before it arrives. And I looked at her face and thought, she doesn't want him to take her. Then I thought, that's insane. She's 7 weeks old. She doesn't want or not want anything yet. You're projecting. Michael took her. She escalated from pre-cry to cry. He said, she's just hungry. She always cries. You need to sleep more. You're too anxious and she picks it up from you. I went and showered. I told myself I was projecting. The second morning it happened. She was 8 weeks old. The third morning, 9 weeks. By the fourth morning, I had begun doing something I didn't admit to myself I was doing. I was watching. Not performing the watching, not making it obvious, just tracking. The specific quality of Olivia's cry when Michael held her versus when anyone else held her. The way her body moved when he picked her up versus when I did, versus when Margaret did. The cry for me, the ordinary cry of a baby wanting something. Fed, changed, held, a communication. The cry for Margaret, almost never. She had a gift with Olivia that I had assumed was grandmother's instinct, the settled confidence of someone who had raised a child before and didn't carry the performance anxiety of new parenthood. The cry for Michael, different. I knew it was different. I could hear the difference the way you can hear the difference between a phone ringing and a fire alarm. Both are noise, both are loud, but the body responds to them differently because the body knows things the mind hasn't processed yet. By the fifth morning, I stopped telling myself I was projecting. By the fifth morning, Olivia's reaction to her father had a name in my head even though I couldn't say it out loud yet. Terror. The 9-week checkup was on a Tuesday. Our pediatrician, Dr. James Okafor, 14 years of practice, the kind of doctor who treats children with the full seriousness they deserve and explains everything to parents without condescension, had been Olivia's doctor since birth. He had delivered the standard early checkup reassurances with genuine warmth. Good weight gain, healthy reflexes, tracking well, no no concerns. Then he asked Michael to hold her for the physical exam. Olivia's body went rigid, not crying immediately. Something that preceded crying. The full body lock, the arch, the breath held before the scream, and then the gasping, and the red face and the shaking and the sounds that I had been hearing every morning for 2 weeks and telling myself were normal. Dr. Okafor watched. His expression didn't change exactly, but something shifted in his attention, a focusing, a precision. A male nurse named David came in to assist. Olivia went completely still, not calm, still. There is a difference. Still is what happens when the nervous system overloads and the body runs out of responses. Shallow breathing, locked limbs, eyes unfocused. Dr. Okafor's hands paused. He looked at Olivia. He looked at Michael. He looked at the nurse. He looked at me. Then Margaret came in from the waiting room. She had been with us all morning and went to Olivia instinctively, and Olivia melted. Shoulders dropped, face softened, the smallest possible half smile. 3 months old, like someone had turned off a current. Dr. Okafor said, "Emily, can you come with me for a moment?" Michael started to stand. "Just Emily," Dr. Okafor said. His voice was even and professional and entirely without room for negotiation. The private room was small and had 2 chairs and an anatomical poster on the wall. Dr. Okafor closed the door. He sat across from me and leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees, the posture of someone who is about to say something that requires you to have his full attention. He said, "I need to describe what I observed today, and I need you to hear me clearly." Olivia showed a specific fear response when Michael attempted to hold her, the rigid posture, the escalation, the gasp. When the male nurse entered, she shifted into what we'd call a freeze response, which is a more advanced stress reaction. When your mother-in-law took her, she displayed complete and immediate de-escalation. He paused. This pattern, fear response towards specific individuals, particularly in an infant this young, doesn't always indicate obvious harm, but it indicates something that has conditioned her to associate specific people with danger. He looked at me steadily. "Emily, I need you to set up cameras in your home, in the areas where Michael spends time with Olivia unsupervised. I need you to do this before another night passes." The floor did not disappear. It did something more gradual and more permanent. It shifted slightly beneath my feet, in the way of something that will never be completely level again. "If the footage shows nothing," he continued, "we will revisit the question and explore other causes. But I have been a pediatrician for 14 years, and what I observed today requires investigation before I can allow another week to pass without it." He wrote 2 names on a card and slid it across to me. Dr. Priya Nair. She's a child welfare specialist with 11 years of experience, and she has worked with our practice before. And Donna Hargrove. She's a family court attorney, 15 years, the best I know for emergency protective orders if it comes to that. He paused. "I hope it doesn't come to that, but I need you to have her number." I looked at the card. I thought about Michael in the nursery doorway every morning for 2 weeks. The rigidity, the scream. I thought about Margaret's spine going straight whenever she heard the front door. I put the card in my pocket. I walked back into the exam room, and I watched Michael hold Olivia for the rest of the appointment, performing ease, performing warmth, the way he performed everything. And I smiled at appropriate moments and asked appropriate questions, and drove us all home in a car where Michael talked about traffic, and Olivia slept in her car seat, and I looked at the road and felt the stone in my chest sit perfectly still. I waited for the shower. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like a small thing, waiting for a shower, but in the arithmetic of a marriage like mine, small things accumulate their own gravity. I had learned over 4 years to wait for windows, the shower, the grocery run, the work call that went long, because windows were when I could do things that were only mine. I heard the water run at 9:12 p.m. I had already opened Amazon on my phone. 3 Wisecam V3 cameras, $42 each. Next day delivery on 2 of them. Same day on the 3rd if I paid the fee. I paid the fee. I sat with my back against the nursery wall while Olivia slept in her crib, and I set up the accounts and configured the cloud storage and chose the motion alert settings with hands that would not entirely stop shaking. I am not a technology person by temperament. I am a middle school English teacher. I deal in sentences and books and the specific challenge of getting a 12-year-old to care about a paragraph. And the setup took longer than it should have because my hands kept shaking, and I had to retype my password 3 times. The shower ran for 11 minutes. I was done in 9. I mounted the cameras the next morning while Michael was at work. 1 in the living room aimed at the primary seating area, 1 in the dining room, 1 in the hallway at an angle that captured the nursery doorway and the approach to it. I told Margaret what I was doing. She didn't ask why. She nodded once, with the expression of a woman who has been waiting for something to happen, and went back to Olivia. The footage was waiting for me at 12:47 p.m. I'd in a private meeting room at my school during my lunch period. I want to be precise about what I saw and what I didn't see, because the story that matters is the one that is true. The morning was normal. Margaret feeding Olivia in the kitchen at 8:30. Margaret on the living room floor with Olivia on the activity mat at 10:15. The baby tracking the hanging toys, kicking, the ordinary beautiful mechanics of a 3-month-old discovering her own hands. Margaret singing something quiet while she rocked her at 11:40. At 12:53 p.m., the front door opened. Michael had told me at breakfast that he had back-to-back client meetings until 4 highs. He had been specific. He was always specific about his schedule, which I had always attributed to consideration, and which I understood differently now. He was home before 1 p.m. He stood in the entry for a moment. He looked toward the kitchen. He looked toward the living room. He looked in a way that I had seen before and not named. The sweep of someone checking sightlines, confirming positions. Margaret's back straightened. Even on the small phone screen, in the 1080p resolution of a $42 camera, I could see it. The slight, involuntary adjustment of someone who has been surprised by a presence they have learned to brace for. Michael smiled at her. His eyes were flat. He reached for Olivia. Margaret hesitated, a fraction of a second, the hesitation of someone calculating whether they could justify not handing her over, and then passed her to him. Michael's face changed. I pressed my face closer to the screen. I want to be careful here, because the instinct is to describe what I saw in the most devastating terms, and I want to resist that, because the devastating terms are not what made it real. What made it real was the subtlety. What made it real was that nothing he did was large enough, visible enough, or obvious enough to point to and say, there, that exact thing. What I saw was this. The moment Margaret looked away, Michael's posture changed. The performance warmth left his face the way water drains, quickly, completely, without residue. He held Olivia against his chest at an angle that was technically correct and was wrong in a way I couldn't fully articulate, the way something can be technically correct and wrong. He said something close to her face, his lips moving, just a few words, too quiet for the camera's audio to capture. His free hand moved to cover her face briefly and then moved away. Olivia went rigid. He bounced her once, one sharp, hard movement, and made a sound against her ear that the camera picked up as a shh, the kind that is too close and too sharp to be a comfort. Then Margaret turned around. Michael's smile came back. She's just fussy, he said lightly. You can take her. Margaret took her. Olivia melted. I sat in the meeting room with my lunch going cold on the table beside me, and I watched this 30-second sequence 4 times before I could move. I called Dr. Okafor from my car at 1:04 p.m. He answered personally. He had left a note with his nurse to transfer my call directly if I rang. I described what I had seen in the flat, precise way I describe things to my students when I need them to understand something exactly. What happened in sequence, without interpretation, layered on top. What Michael's face looked like, what his hands did, what Olivia did, what happened when Margaret looked away versus when she was watching. Dr. Sayaj. Okafor did not say I'm sure it's nothing, or let's wait and see. I'm going to connect you to Dr. Nair directly, he said. I'll call ahead. Can you forward the footage to my office email before 4 o'clock? I can forward it in 10 minutes. Do that first, then call Dr. Nair. I forwarded the footage to Dr. Okafor's office, then to Donna Hargrove, the family court attorney, whose name was on the card in my pocket. Then, and this was the part I sat with the longest before doing it, to Margaret. My phone rang 11 minutes after I sent it to her. She was crying. Not the performative crying of someone managing a situation, the raw, ugly crying of someone who has been holding something in a long time and has finally run out of the ability to hold it. I didn't know for certain, she said. I swear to you I didn't know for certain, but I was afraid. I've been afraid and I didn't know what I was seeing, and I thought I was imagining Margaret. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I need you to tell Dr. Nair everything you've seen, every incident you noticed, everything you were afraid of. Today, if possible. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. I will tell them everything. I know you were protecting her, I said. You were there every day protecting her. She made a sound I couldn't interpret. She's safe, I said. We're going to keep her safe. Dr. Priya Nair had 11 years as a child welfare specialist, split between clinical work and consulting for family court. She met with me at 3:30 p.m. in her office, which was designed with the deliberate calm of a space used to helping people say difficult things. Good lighting, plants, a box of tissues on the table that I noted and hoped not to need. She reviewed the footage. She reviewed it twice with the focused attention of someone cataloging specific behaviors against a professional framework. She asked me questions in a careful sequence that I understood from the structure of them was building a documented record. What you've captured on the footage, she said when she was done, is consistent with a pattern of what we term intimidation behavior. Actions designed to cause distress in a dependent, conducted strategically when supervision is absent. The fact that the behavior stops the moment your mother-in-law's attention returns is significant. It indicates awareness that the behavior is not acceptable, which indicates intent. She looked at me steadily. I want to be honest with you. This footage alone does not prove a criminal act. What it does is establish a documented pattern that supports an emergency motion for a temporary protective order. It also establishes grounds for a full welfare evaluation. She paused. My recommendation is to proceed on both tracks simultaneously. Donna Hargrove, by phone at 4:45 p.m., said the same thing more directly. This footage, plus the pediatrician's documented observations from the 9-week exam, plus the mother-in-law's testimony gives us strong grounds for an emergency TPO. We can have it in front of a judge by end of business today if we move now. Move now, I said. Emily? Her voice was direct and not unkind. Is there anywhere you can be tonight that isn't your house? A friend? Your parents? I want to be at my house, I said, with Olivia. A brief pause. Then you'll have a family court officer with you when Michael gets home. I'll arrange it. Do not tell Michael anything before he arrives. I won't, I said. I picked up Olivia from Margaret at 5:15 p.m. Margaret had spent the afternoon with Dr. Nair providing a formal statement of everything she had observed over 10 weeks in that house. worse. The incidents she had witnessed, the feelings she had suppressed, the spine that went straight every time she heard the front door. She handed me Olivia with both hands, deliberately, and held my gaze for a moment. "I should have said something sooner," she said. "You stayed," I said. "Every day you stayed." She nodded. Her eyes were red and dry now, past the stage of crying. I took Olivia home. I stood in the kitchen while she slept against my shoulder, and I looked at the house around me. The house I had chosen with Michael, the countertops I had picked, the paint color on the walls that I had stood in a hardware store for 40 minutes to select. And I felt, surprisingly, not grief. Not yet. Grief was coming, and I knew it, and I was prepared to let it come in its own time. What I felt in that moment was done. Completely, quietly, irrevocably done. At 6:02 p.m., a family court officer named James Rowe arrived at my door. He was 50s, methodical, with the calm of someone who has done this many times and understands what is required. "Ma'am," he showed his identification. "I have a temporary protective order issued by Judge Renata Holloway about 40 minutes ago. I'll be present when your husband returns. You don't need to say anything you don't want to say." "I know what I want to say," I said. We waited. Michael's car pulled into the driveway at 6:34 p.m. He came through the front door with his jacket over his arm, the easy, unguarded entrance of a man who does not expect anything to have changed, and he stopped when he saw James Rowe standing in his living room. His eyes went to me, to Olivia on my hip, to Margaret seated at the kitchen table, not looking at her son. Something moved across his face, the smooth surface disrupted, the performed ease he carried everywhere finally showing what was underneath it. Panic. "Emily," he started. "She's 3 months old," I said. "Just that. Quietly. And she was already afraid of you." I stepped back inside and closed the door between us. The temporary protective order was in effect for 14 days while the full welfare evaluation was conducted. Dr. Nair's evaluation took 3 weeks. Interviews, documentation review, observation sessions. At the end of it, she produced a 12-page report that used careful, clinical language to describe what the footage showed and what Margaret's testimony corroborated. The language was careful and clinical because careful and clinical is what holds up. The conclusions were not. The report went to family court. It went to Child Protective Services. It went to Donna Hargrove's file as Exhibit A, alongside the camera footage and Dr. Okafor's documented observations from the 9-week exam. Michael retained an attorney who argued that the footage was ambiguous, that infant fear responses are non-specific and unreliable as evidence, that Margaret's testimony was the product of a difficult relationship with her son and should be weighted accordingly. Judge Renata Holloway, 22 years on the family court bench, reviewed Dr. Nair's report, reviewed the footage, reviewed Dr. Okafor's notes, heard Margaret's testimony, which was quiet and precise and did not waver. She granted sole custody to me pending a full hearing. She granted supervised visitation only, with a professional monitor present. She ordered a psychological evaluation of Michael before any custody arrangement could be revisited. Michael's attorney said he would appeal. Donna Hargrove said, "Let him. I want to tell you about one moment that I have returned to many times since. It was 3 days after the protective order was served. I was at my parents' house with Olivia. I had stayed there for the first week while Donna advised me on the house situation, and my mother was holding Olivia in the living room while I sat in the kitchen trying to eat something. My mother came in and said, "Come look." Olivia was on her activity mat in the middle of the living room floor. Her father was in another state, separated from her by a court order and 200 miles. The house was quiet. She was laughing. Not the reflexive smile of a newborn, the genuine, surprised, discovering laugh of a 3-month-old who has just found out that the world contains something hilarious, which turned out to be her own hand when it crossed her line of vision. She laughed at her hand and then looked around the room like she wanted to share the news, and my mother laughed back at her, and Olivia laughed again. She was not rigid. She was not screaming. She was not frozen and still and shallow breathing in the arms of someone her body had decided to be afraid of. She was just a baby, laughing at her own hand. I sat on the floor next to her activity mat, and I cried for the first time since all of it started. The real crying, not the managed kind, not the crying you do in controlled installments to keep yourself functional. I cried until I was done, and then I looked at my daughter still kicking and laughing on her mat, entirely untroubled by my face. She reached for my finger when I offered it. I am writing this 14 months later. Olivia is 17 months old. She walks now. The particular bold front-weighted walk of a toddler who has only recently discovered that legs are capable of this and has fully committed to the project. She has 8 teeth and a strong opinion about bananas and a laugh that is unreasonable in its volume for someone her size. She is, in every measurable way, thriving. The custody arrangement is in place. Michael has supervised visits twice monthly with a professional monitor present, contingent on continued compliance with the psychological evaluation requirements. His attorney's appeal was denied. He has not attempted to violate the terms of the order, which Donna says is more than she expected and less than she requires to feel reassured. I do not feel reassured. I don't think I will for a long time. That is what I have been told to expect by Dr. Sylvia Park, a trauma-informed therapist I started seeing 4 months ago, and I am trying to let it be accurate rather than fighting it. Margaret comes every other Sunday. She and Olivia have their own language at this point, the particular communication that develops between a grandmother and a grandchild who have had time and will and the absence of threat. She sits on the floor and builds towers for Olivia to knock down, and they do this for as long as Olivia is interested, which is always long longer than you'd expect. Margaret told me something at dinner 2 months ago. She said, I saw things I didn't let myself name. For 10 weeks, I saw things and I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was a bad mother for thinking it. And then you sent me that video and I understood I wasn't imagining it. I was just hoping I was. She looked at her granddaughter across the dinner table, dropping pasta pieces off her tray one by one and watching them fall with the scientific interest of someone running an important experiment. She doesn't freeze anymore, Margaret said. She said it quietly. She didn't say it like it was a relief, though it was. She said it like it was a fact that was worth saying out loud. No, I said, she doesn't. I keep coming back to the doctor's office. The small room, the 2 chairs, the anatomical poster. Your daughter is displaying a specific fear response toward her father. You need to set up cameras in your home immediately. 14 words that changed everything. I have thought about what would have happened if he hadn't said them. If he had said instead, all babies are fussy, first-time parent anxiety is very common, she'll grow out of it. If he had been the kind of doctor who prioritizes comfort over truth, who treats parents as nervous variables to be managed rather than necessary partners in understanding a child's safety. I have thought about Margaret. 10 weeks of a straight spine and a presence that put her body between her granddaughter and something she couldn't fully name. 10 weeks of staying. I have thought about what Olivia's body knew before any of us said it out loud. The rigidity, the scream, the freeze, the pure animal intelligence of an infant whose nervous system had already cataloged a danger that the adults around her were still trying to process through language and reason, and the desperate hope that they were wrong. She knew first. She told us in the only language she had, and someone finally listened.